All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're completely transforming how you build your research foundation. If you've ever stared at a literal mountain of academic papers and just felt totally overwhelmed, yeah, you are absolutely not alone. But we're going to change that today. We're diving into the architect's guide to mastering the literature review. Think of it like this. We're going to treat your research like a high-stakes construction project. We need to build a framework that takes your work from, basic to absolutely groundbreaking. So, right off the bat, we've got to tackle the biggest elephant in the room. A literature review is not just a summary of papers. I repeat, not just a summary. Writing a glorified book report where you just describe one paper after another, that is exactly what we want to avoid. It's an amateur trap, honestly, and it just leads to a weak, unconvincing foundation for your research. So we're breaking that habit right here, right now. Instead, I really want you to think of your review as a strategic mission. Every single sentence you write has to work toward answering this one massive, dual-part question. What is the current state of knowledge, and why is my work needed? If your draft isn't answering both halves of that, well, it's just not doing its job. Your reader has to see the whole landscape first, and then they need to see exactly where you fit into that giant puzzle. Okay, here's our blueprint for today's explainer. 1. The big misconception. 2. Setting the foundation. 3. The power of themes. 4. Finding the research gap. And 5. Your actionable workflow. This is our structured path from ditching bad habits all the way to building a masterclass level synthesis. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the big misconception, and exactly why amateur reviews fail. So, what should a professional review actually do? Well, it actively accomplishes 5 very specific objectives. First, it shows what's already been done. Second, it identifies the major trends and methods out there. Third, it compares those different approaches side by side. Fourth, it reveals the limitations, the gaps in the current knowledge. And fifth, it justifies your own research. Just notice how active those verbs are: identify, compare, reveal, justify. That requires deep analysis, not just passive description. On the flip side, though, we see these incredibly common mistakes all the time. Purely summarizing? Way too descriptive. Having no structure? That usually just ends up being a random brain dump of papers that completely confuses the reader. Going too broad means you're trying to review an entire scientific field, which, let's face it, is impossible. Offering no critical analysis means you're just regurgitating results. And the absolute worst offense? Having no research gap. Because without that, your reader is never, ever going to see why your new work actually matters. Moving right along to Section 2, setting the foundation. This is all about scope and collection, because any strong construction always starts right here. Now, you really have to understand the power of scope. Let's consider an example. Say your topic is GNSS in transportation. Honestly, that is hopelessly broad. You'd literally drown in tens of thousands of papers. But what if we tighten that up? Machine learning-assisted GNSS multipath mitigation in urban canyon environments. Wow, that is highly specific. And here's the secret. A narrow scope naturally produces a much stronger, punchier review. Why? Because you can actually evaluate the specific engineering trade-offs within a clearly defined niche. Okay, so once you've nailed down that razor-sharp scope, you need strategic material collection. Please, don't just grab the first 10 PDFs you find. Use the primary databases: Google Scholar, IEEE Explore, Scopus, you know the drill. You're aiming for a solid 20 to 50 high-quality papers. And you really want to focus that search on highly cited papers, maybe some recent review papers to get the lay of the land, landmark methods that everybody references, and crucially, the major developments from just the last 3 to 5 years. That ensures your work is totally up to date. That brings us to Section 3, the power of themes, and organizing your concepts. This is a real pivot point for us. Listen, this right here is probably the biggest mistake I see researchers make. It's the chronological paper-by-paper summary. A weak structure basically goes, paper A did this, then paper B did this, oh, and paper C did this. Guys, that's literally just a bibliography. It's going to put your readers straight to sleep. But contrast that with a thematic synthesis. Here, you're organizing by concepts, say signal processing methods or machine learning approaches. You group and compare papers inside those specific themes. Doing this instantly, and I mean instantly, creates analysis instead of just a boring summary. So you might be wondering, what does a masterful thematic paragraph actually look like? Well, it follows a very specific flow. First up, a topic sentence to introduce the theme. Simple enough. Second, evidence and comparison. This is where you actually compare several different papers that tackled that exact same theme. Third, critical analysis. Discuss their strengths, their limitations, maybe their computational costs. And finally, and this is key, a gap statement. This highlights exactly what remains unresolved by all those papers you just talked about. I'm telling you, this structure is a game changer. Let's actually listen to how this sounds in practice. Quote, traditional signal processing approaches achieve good multipath suppression in static environments. However, their performance degrades significantly in highly dynamic urban scenarios. End quote. Now that right there, that is professional literature review language. It's evaluating the engineering trade-offs. It acknowledges a real strength, the good suppression in static environments, but then it immediately pivots to a critical limitation. That is exactly the kind of analytical tone you want to strike. Which flows perfectly into Section 4, Finding the Research Gap. Let's talk about identifying those crucial limitations. It's pretty amazing how clearly we can categorize the missing pieces in the literature once we start looking. For instance, you might spot a limited dataset gap. That's where a method was maybe only tested in a simulation but never out in the real world. Or maybe you find a poor robustness gap, where a system totally fails in complex environments like urban canyons. Or even a high computation, meaning it's just totally unsuitable for real-time deployment. But here's the mindset shift. These issues aren't just flaws in other people's work. No, they are the absolute perfect opportunities for your research to swoop in and save the day. And once you've illuminated that gap, you need a bridge. Therefore, this research proposes, honestly, this is the crucial so what transition. It's the exact moment your literature review connects directly to your own research objectives. You've spent all this time proving a real problem exists, right? Well, now you're stepping up to the plate to offer the solution. Let's see how seamlessly that bridge works in action. Existing machine learning approaches often require large data sets. Therefore, this work investigates lightweight AI-based multipath mitigation. Boom! Do you see how naturally that flows? You have this well-identified gap, the fact that current approaches are just too heavy and need massive data sets, and that directly justifies the absolute necessity of the specific, lightweight solution you're proposing. It literally makes your research feel inevitable, like, of course this needs to happen. All right, finally we've reached Section 5, your actionable workflow. Time to look at the 4-phase process. Now, I know writing a massive synthesis can feel pretty intimidating, so we're going to break it down into 4 highly manageable phases. Phase 1 is paper collection. That's where you grab your 20 to 50 key papers. Phase 2 is classification, grouping them by method, application, whatever makes sense. Phase 3, build a comparison table. And Phase 4, actually write your synthesis, using those thematic paragraphs we talked about earlier. Seriously, if you follow the sequential process, writer's block basically just disappears. I really want to highlight Phase 3 for a second, because this comparison matrix, it is your absolute secret weapon. Before you even write a single paragraph, you map out your papers across specific categories: paper, method, dataset, strength, limitation. By forcing yourself to fill in those strength and limitation columns for every single paper, you are guaranteeing critical analysis. You're literally preventing yourself from writing a pure summary, because the table itself demands a critique. It's brilliant. We're going to wrap up today with an incredibly simple formula. Ready? A true literature review is summary plus comparison plus critique plus gap identification. It is never just a summary. Never. So I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on today. Look at the draft you're working on right now. Are you just blindly piling up bricks of summary, kind of hoping it eventually resembles a wall? Or are you truly using this formula to architect a masterpiece? The foundation of your next big breakthrough is entirely in your hands. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and happy researching!